I think you said something really interesting there, Jim, that I may want to ask both you and Jess about. So the rate of change does seem to be continuing to increase. And I think you're right, you're not going to stop learning, but you could stop documenting and you could stop sharing. And so it feels like just the strategy you described about being video first and having your geeks, your DT team help support subject matter experts in reducing the lift on their end, feels like it makes those knowledge assets more sustainable and durable because it's not a 200-hour effort to replace this long written documentation. It's maybe for the subject matter, you said 1 to 5 hours if ACC totally changes or your approach to site observation reports totally changes. Is that part of like your conversation with them?
Yeah, I think a important part of context, it's not like we are building a massive repository of information. So we don't build content that exists in the world. I'm not going to build a series of how to use Bluebeam or an intro to Revit. What we tend to build content around is when we're rolling out processes or we identify places that people need help. And so, like, we did a series on field reports, but it's really around how to use, like, our iPads, our templates. This is how we do field reports. It's not necessarily like an intro to Bluebeam on the iPad or how to do a field report in general. Same thing with ACC. That series is being built because we are rolling out a new folder template. So it's really around, this is how you set up your project to be successful within Shepley. This is our folder structure. This is how you apply permissions, that kind of thing.
To your point, there is part of people's reluctance to deal with change is the amount of aggravation that they know they're going to have to go through in order to get through the cycle of change. And making it easier to create documentation for a process means that people will have less perceived opportunity loss or sunk cost in the recreating of that content if the process needs to change in some meaningful way. So the more we can reduce the friction about creating this is the communication plan for how this change needs to take place in the business, the easier it's going to be for us to convince people, okay, well, a new thing came out that is going to have substantial amount of value for us, and we need to change that thing that we just put into place last year. If it took them 120 hours to write that documentation for it, the people that did that are going to be real sad. And they're
have
going
a lot
to
of
be
sunk cost
slightly,
in that, right? Yeah.
They will be
exactly.
slightly less sad if it only took them 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
I think also building out that content into bite-sized portions. So if something changes, you don't necessarily have to throw out the whole series. You maybe just remove a video, add a new one, or if there's a new feature, you can just slip that one in the middle. And so it makes it easier to update content rather than rebuild content.
To make it, because it's more modular.
Yeah, but that said, video is harder to edit than text is. So
yeah.
you'd create strategies around managing video, which will help it get closer to managing the effort to manage text and screen caps.
It's easier to create video, but it's harder to edit. Whereas the text, it's harder to create, but it's easier to edit.